key sectors where the participation of women, youths, as well as persons living with disabilities is quite very key. At national level also, we've seen that protocol. There has been quite a number of documents that have been produced, and a case of the CATSIP, which basically also amplify further the participation of the non-state actors, which includes, among others, the smallholder farmers, and also the youths of led small farmers, CSOs in decision making, as well as media, which plays a critical role in the participation of citizens through awareness of key information which is supposed to be understood by men. As such, we try to outline what we think are some of the key gaps in the proposed bills, and further recommended action to be taken into account to ensure that will be seen as inclusive once we start operations. Without really wasting much of your time, we are quickly going to delve into our presentation of the three bills by chapter. Thereafter, then we'll ask you for your questions or reactions from our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and honorable members. We'll start with the Agriculture Lands Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 31 of 2026. We recognize that the Agriculture Lands Amendment Bill of 2026 seeks to revise the composition of the Agriculture Lands Board, effectively amending the Agriculture Lands Act of 1960, of which the Act provides the legal framework for managing and distributing state-owned agriculture land in Zambia, primarily through the Agriculture Lands Act Board, which advises the Minister on land use the alienation of ordin to farmers, and oversees the administration of tenant farming schemes to ensure organized agricultural development. In our submission, Chair and honorable members, we looked at the clauses that are into the proposed bill. Then we looked at the observations that we had to observe. Then also we have provided implications and recommendations for those clauses that we observed. In the bill, Clause 2A, we observed that the board consists of the part-time who are appointed by the minister. That is the chairperson, who shall be the person from the private sector with knowledge and experience in matters relevant to the Act. Our observation, Chair, is that the position of the chairperson has been strictly limited to the private sector, despite us having a lot of stakeholders on the subject that we are discussing today. There are a lot of stakeholders who are players in the agriculture sector, and our observation is that it has been restricted only to the private sector and not considering the diverse of these stakeholders. The implications for that is that while government recognizes the critical role that the private sector plays in driving economic growth, its dominance in this board may limit inclusivity. So inclusive participation may be limited. So inclusivity ensures that the realizations that we have, or the gains that we get from this, remains inclusive. Our recommendations, Chair, is that we revert to the text of the current Act that states that a chairperson or a chairman appointed by the minister to be other than a public officer. but we recognize and we maintain that this chairperson must have the knowledge and experience in matters relevant to this act, because that will be key for the chair to read the board. We have also noted that there is lack or there is no vice that is being proposed in this bill. So our recommendation is that there should be a vice chairperson who should be elected from amongst themselves, and this one also should be other than a public officer. On section 4, part 3 of the bill, we note that the ministries or institutions that highlighted in this bill and organizations referred to in subsection 1 shall nominate their representatives for appointment by the president. In our observation of the bill, we observed that both the president and the minister have powers to make appointments on the same. The implications, Chair and honorable members, is that while it is important for the office of the president to offer appointment oversight, it also undermines the devolution efforts. And our recommendation is that we need to stick to decentralization around these appointments, and in that we are recommending that only the minister should appoint the chairperson as well as the representatives from the ministries. In all these observation, chairs, we are concluding on the agriculture lands amendment bill that the provisions raises concerns around inclusivity and concentration of appointment powers. So limiting the chairperson to the may exclude diverse stakeholder perspectives, while overlapping roles between the president and the minister risks undermining decentralization. So addressing these issues will strengthen representation, clarity, and the board's overall effectiveness. So we submit, Chair, in that aspect when it comes to agriculture and amendment bill, and I'll ask my colleague to submit also on the coffee amendment bill. Thank you, Chair.
Chapter 2 of our submission looks at the Coffee Amendment Bill number 36 of 2026. Coffee Amendment Bill of 2026 seeks to revise the composition of the Coffee Board of Zambia as outlined in the Principal Act of 1989. The Act regulates Zambia's coffee by mandating the varieties to be grown and requiring licenses for all production and export. The Coffee Board of Zambia enforces these standards, overseeing licensing, quality control, and the registration of growers to ensure the industry remains competitive and legally compliant. In our we find the following articles as of interest to this discussion. Article 4.1 of the proposed bill, which is looking at the composition of the board. In our observation, the composition has no representation of such as women, youth, and persons living with disability, civil society, and media. The implication of this is that the absence of inclusive representation on the board poses the risk of an equal outcome. Increased or organized private sector representation may favor the sector's interest at the expense of small-scale medium enterprises and government resource mobilization efforts. The sector advocates for tax incentives. Further, in our observation, we find that the private sector is allocated more seats when you look at the sub-articles D and G compared to other categories. Further, in our recommendation, any board that is not inclusive, especially in all sectors, especially in sectors rather like tobacco, that is not inclusive, may suffer the exclusion of key players. Our recommendation is that for the vice chairperson, he or she should be someone from public office. Further, should including these other marginalized and other key stakeholders like civil society and media who have not been added of people to sit on the board. In conclusion, the proposed composition under the Coffee Amendment Bill of 2026 raises significant concerns regarding inclusivity and balance of representation. The exclusion of key groups such as the women, youth, persons with disabilities, civil society, and media risks undermining equitable outcomes, while the disproportionate allocation of seats to the private sector may skew decision-making in favor of its interest. Addressing these gaps through more inclusive and balanced boards, including the appointment of a non-public officer as vice chairperson, will enhance fairness, accountability, and overall effectiveness. Act. Chair, that comes to the end of the submission on the coffee bill, and I allow my colleague to come and conclude with the tobacco amendment bill. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. The amendment of the tobacco bill, National Assembly number 16 of 2026, Chair and honorable members, is that the tobacco amendment bill of 2026, revisions of the competition of the Tobacco Board of Zambia as our Principal Tobacco Act of 2022. Honorable members, what we see is that the Act's framework is designed to promote, regulate, and monitor the production, 1, marketing, 2, and packaging of tobacco in Zambia. Honorable Katambo, as the chair, under this act, the Tobacco Board of Zambia serves as a statutory body mandated to ensure a and ethical industry. Honorable members, is that its core functions really includes registering and licensing growers and buyers, regulating imports and exports, and operating essential services like sales floors. Honorable members, and through you, Chair, our analysis of this amendment bill is basically on the following clauses. Article 1F, amendment of Section 5. Our observation is as follows. The bill proposes that the board appears, first of all, to largely consist of private sector and excludes all other key stakeholders such as civil society organizations, marginalized groups, and media. Honorable members, the composition further does not speak to the existence of the vice chairperson or the chairman. Chair, what are the implications, and honorable members, to this amendment? Firstly, is that the absence of critical oversight representation, such as the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, CCPC, the Zambia Bureau of Standards, and the Ministry of Health, may prioritize profit-making decisions while neglecting healthy considerations. Honorable members, our observation is that the bill does not include these key representation as part of the board, but also the absence of the chairperson may raise ambiguity on who is delegated as chairperson duties when need arises or presented, but also that the board is private sector led to focus on profit maximization and ignoring key fundamental principle related to protection and impact. and that is a concern. Chair and honorable members, Honorable Mtachalo and Honorable Taengwa, what we see here is that if the case continues as such, we are likely to see again profit over our own people. But what are our recommendations through you, Chair and honorable members, is that there is need to include civil society organizations on this board, but also persons with disability have to be included on this board. The inclusion of young people, Ministry of Health, that is quite critical. The conversation of tobacco, a health implication in the Principal Act. So the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission will be very, very key, because we're talking about regulation, marketing, and ensuring the packaging of tobacco in Zambia, but also the Bureau of Food Standards SABS. Secondly, there is a need to reduce the number of private sector players in the board composition. Honorable Katambo, it will be imperative, as observed, that it appears to be private sector led, and our recommendation is to reduce the number of private sector players in this in order to create a balanced level ground. There is also a need to have a vice chairperson who should be elected amongst themselves other than a public officer. Honorable members, the last recommendation is that the chairperson of this board should be appointed by the minister and should be other than a public officer. To the other elements is that, first of all, if we look at private sector-led composition, the implication is that, number one, compliance becomes compromised in terms of operation. Two, there will be more externalization of financial resource, hence the withdrawal from local economy. We are likely to see tax avoidance more prominent. Again, we are likely to see weaken the playing field, especially for local players on account of limited access to capital resources. But again, there is a likelihood of having a bias towards foreign investors as opposed to local investor. And this may inevitably ignore the key principles such as child labor and gender. As we conclude on this amendment bill, we are saying that the tobacco bill of 2026 raises concerns around limited inclusivity and weak oversight within the board's composition, which will be very important for the committee, honorable members, to really take keen interest in this composition. But also the dominance of private sector representation, coupled with exclusion of key stakeholders such as the regulatory bodies, the civil society, the Ministry of Health. These risks prioritizing commercial interests over public health and consumer protection. Additionally, honorable members, and is that the absence of the vice chairperson creates a governance gap in leadership continuity. Also addressing these, a more inclusive, balanced, and clearly structured board will strengthen accountability, safeguard public interest, and improve the effectiveness of the Act. And therefore, without addressing these, Chair, the sector is likely to face challenges as outlined in our observations above. I hand over. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, Chair, thank you very much for according us this opportunity just to highlight the content of our submission. We really want to see that the recent constitutional review put a test in terms of the direction we want to go, because there was an emphasis in terms of inclusion, youth participation, women participation, persons with disability participation. As such, we all the bills that should be coming to Parliament, they should be that level of consistency. So we submit now for your reactions so that we can amplify further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So allow honorable members to raise their concerns and hear your reaction. Yes, Honorable Taylor.
Thank you, Chairperson. Action 8, in your submission, you have indicated that the composition of the board, tobacco board, is mainly enlarged with the presence of members of the private sector. In your own opinion, if you were to be given an opportunity to remove some members, which one would you prefer to be removed in that on that board? The second question again is on the issue of I don't know whether I heard you clearly where you are suggesting that there's need for the Minister of Health to sit on the tobacco bill. I just needed you to clarify that, because there are other stakeholders who have insisted that having the Minister of Health sit on the tobacco bill, since the one government, it will not be necessary. So I wanted your response from that.
Thank you very much. Section 5 of the Principal Act provides for the appointment of the chairperson by the minister. In subsection 3, and there's also the election of the vice chairperson in subsection 4. So I put it to you that do you consider in this Tobacco Act changing your submission on page 5? If you check your submission on page 5. On the Tobacco Act, yeah. The chairperson should be appointed by the minister. And then there's the election of the vice chairperson. Anyway, as you look into that, also on the Coffee Amendment Act, currently the board comprises of the PS, the permanent secretary, as the chairperson, obviously coming for the ministry responsible for agriculture. Removing the permanent secretary as the automatic chairperson and providing for any other persons with knowledge and experience in coffee and agriculture. What is your reaction? So you can take those three.
Thank you. My colleague Michael start, then Mumbi, and Uchizi, and the rest.
Thank you, Chair, and honorable members. Honorable Tengwa, thank you for that important question with regards to the composition of the board. And you asked a question in your own basis, who do you recommend to remove? And I think we've put up the observation is that you look at the composition, it has the tobacco. From the commercial side, we have representation who are private sector, but again it comes back and then tells us that there would be again 2 representatives from the private sector, and then other compositions are having a representative. By having a representative, it implies that our understanding is that we have 1 representative from such a sector. For example, the research or the academia, for example, sector will have 1. So already when you look at that, it gives the more dominance in the composition. And this is our concern. Unless we are saying that as a country now, we have resolved as a collective that players within the tobacco industry are not anyone else apart from private sector. But that would be wrong, because also the principle, supreme law of the land, allows for every player within the tobacco industry to contribute. So I think the removal of the private sector has to be reduced, and that is our recommendation, is that we need to have a balanced composition. We have missing representation there. For example, youth, the representation of persons with disability, the representation from media, who are the carriers of the message of what is happening within the tobacco industry. So if we are saying 1 representative from each, so should be from the private sector as well. On the element of the Ministry of Health, it is very imperative that when we are discussing issues of tobacco, because this is about consumption, and the people responsible for consumption and regulating what is consumed within the health of this nation is a Ministry of Health. And then therefore, if we have to regulate, for example, on one, how production as the amendment provides for, if we have to promote, market, if we have to package, then the Ministry of Health should be informed, should be aware, should be at that table to determine to what extent are these, for example, products going to have an effect on our Zambians, the ordinary Zambian. But the reason why we are bringing in other stakeholders like Zambia Bureau of Standards and the Consumer Protection is basically to protect the interest of Zambians. We to have a production that surges high, whilst we have our people who are not economically healthy. Because then the risk goes up, we are likely to lose human health. So Ministry of Health becomes a key stakeholder in this conversation to help and protect as we balance between production as well as human capital. There was a proposal around the vice chairperson, and I think we have highlighted the importance of having the chair, the vice chair in this regard, is basically to allow, and I think we've seen the pattern from the coffee bill that has clearly stipulated that there is a chairperson and there is a vice chairperson, but when we come to the tobacco bill, it does not provide for that. So what we are saying is that first of all is the inclusion of that, and this has to be done from among themselves, the people that have been appointed into that committee. However, our proposition is not on the appointment. Our proposition is basically how do we ensure that first of all we have the vice chairperson within, but secondly is that once all these representatives have been elected to represent the various stakeholders, either from academia, from the youth, from the person's disability, we understand that the confinement of authority for them to carry out duties comes from the minister and not from the president. And that's why I'm saying that that appointment now to give them authority to carry out duties should be limited to the minister and not to the president. I'll allow my other colleagues.
Thank you very much, Chair. So on the question of the coffee board, and I believe you said the PS remain in the chair.
Currently, the PS is the chairperson of the board.
Yes.
Yeah, now there will be the removal of the PS in this new act. What is your reaction?
Yes. So to that, I think echoing on what my colleague has already spoken about, we do recognize the authority of the minister and the privilege that has been given to him to appoint chairperson. I think the only reservation that we have is on the vice chair. We recommend that it should be someone other than public office. Whether it will remain the PS or any other person, that would probably be within the prerogative of the minister himself if they see it as a necessary action to take, but the action to allow the minister an independent decision on appointing the chairperson, but to lean on the fact that it would be imperative that the person who is appointed as the chairperson of this board must be well vested in the subject and must have the capacity to lead, particularly on the act as well as the subject at hand, which is coffee. And like I said, the vice chairperson should be one other than a public officer. I think any other issue remains purely, again, similar to the tobacco issue, is the issue of the composition itself for the coffee board as well. When you look at the Article 4.1 on the composition and you go to sub-Article D, it clearly already gives two positions to the coffee growers, commercial as well as small scale, which are usually from the private sector, but it also goes on in G to add on two extra positions again for private sector. So it's still falling on the issue of dominance by private sector, and we're still recommending that this must be revisited to ensure that there is no dominance from any party on the board. Thank you.
So in the Agricultural Lands Bill, where is it provided the appointment on the same members of the board in the agriculture by the president? Yes, I think Michael would be able to tackle that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chair. You've clearly outlined, and I think when you look at, and I think we are looking at the
so
agriculture.
Let's just be very explicitly clear.
Correct.
Where the president has the powers to appoint on these same members of the board. Yes, you can go ahead.
No. So thank you so much, Chair, for that question. So we are referring to the Agriculture Lands Bill.
Yes.
Yes. So when you go down in the bill, Part 5, you see that immediately after the outline of the composition of the bill, it comes at the end where it says 2 representatives from the private sector, and then after that you'll be able to see that the appointment then by which these individuals are being appointed then shall be by the president. But already we see on top where we're starting from, when we start from the composition, it is highlighting that the minister will be able to do those works. So we saw that if we are going to have these 2 appointing authority, then there is already confusion in terms of who does what and who leads what. And that's why we are saying that if we are going to, in the spirit of decentralization, and we are trying to ensure that there is decentralization and devolution of power and authority, if it is being given to the minister to do that, it will then becomes imperative that all the representatives from other sectors remain so through which the minister should carry out that duty.
But shouldn't we be clear that it's only the minister who does the appointment?
Correct.
So from the board, the representation from the Zambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also a representation from Zambia Environmental Management Agency, ZEMA. Don't you think ZEMA plays a very critical role as a stakeholder in the tobacco growing and in all its entire value chain? Okay. What is your reaction?
Thank you very much, Chair. And I want, once I address this question, ZEMA, their mandate is to regulate and also monitor. And I think there should be clear separation of duty, just as it is with the PS most of the time. And if they are going to preside on matters related to policy direction, so there's that sort of conflict. And that's why, if you've noted from onset when we've been making this submission, we've been emphasizing on the need to say that any investment should be very inclusive, because there are so many issues that need to be looked at critically. The interest of the CSO when they sit in these spaces, for example, they'll be looking at the impact from the social and the economic. And I think we have highlighted issues to do with the displacement, child and so forth and so on. Whilst for our colleagues within the private sector, their focus is profit maximization, and they might overlook some of these things which are very, very critical. Earlier on, Honorable Member from Kawata indicated that who would you suggest? Definitely for us, I think the number of private sector players, if they can be reduced and replaced by the seat by the CSOs, and also even young people, even persons with disability, because we're talking about impact from the environment, of which now ZEMA comes in now to start now regulating and ensuring that there is enforcement in terms of how these players operate. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable members, any other concerns? There's an addition from your member. Thank you, sir. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe just to add on your last point about, I think, Zaki. I think from the three bills that we have, I think all of them have provided room for the private sector to present. And I think Zaki is obviously a body that represents the private sector, but I don't think it's necessary to prescribe that an organization, especially within a law, I don't think it's necessary to prescribe particular organizations. I think within the private sector themselves, through the powers of the minister, I think Zaki can find their way. They can find their way to have their views represented through the private sector member that is on the board. Maybe just to add as well, given that we have the Ministry of Justice in the room, I think looking at the three bills, and I'm sure it's a process you are carrying out on other pieces of legislation, I think it's also important to have some kind of standard in terms of what a board should look like. I think we've highlighted issues, chair, for instance. I think that's very important in terms of continuity of work. If the chair is not available, things can still move. And I think the Ministry of Justice also have, I think recently there was a corporate governance framework that was launched by the government. Frameworks like that can also be of benefit for the ministry, but also for the process going forward. Thank you.
In the Agriculture Policy Research Institute, this is Action Aid. Yeah. Too many witnesses today. Sorry. Yeah. So Action Aid, thank you so much for interaction, and thank you so much for your in-depth responses to our concerns, and thank you so much for your submission. I had conferred you Cap 12 of the laws of Zambia that granted you immunity as we deliberated. Allow me to remove this immunity so that you remain as Action Aid. Have a blessed day, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. We would also ask maybe if we can get a picture, a group photo together.
Okay. Yes, Honorable Member.
Beneath the cracked layer of mud, the Nile crocodile lies motionless, waiting for a flood that may